So this next question, it's for everyone, but Jay, I'm sure you'll have some specific insight for us. It's, right now, whether or not it's a literal increase in violence or it's just that we're becoming more aware of it. Regardless, I think now a lot of the questions that's on people's mind is sort of what should we do if we notice a hateful incident or are affected by one? And I think, Jay, if you could also talk about specifically what hate crimes are, how they're prosecuted, how that works on the from the DA's side, that would be really helpful.
Thank you. I'd be really happy to do that. And I don't want to just give a big run-on presentation. So please interrupt me and cut me off if I'm going on, because I have a lot.
I'll be sure to.
A lot on my mind and a lot to share. And as I look around this group of mostly young people, I remember the very first hate crime I ever prosecuted was 26 years ago. There was a young man named John who grew up in Los Altos Hills, and he pulled into a gas station in Cupertino one night, and a white man, young man, started running up alongside his car and started making slant eyes and put his hands in front and bobbed his head up and down and was making ching chong chang gibberish. And John stopped his car and he rolled down the window. He said, "What are you?" He didn't say, WTF, because what are you doing? And the guy stopped and said, "Hey, F you." And John got out of the car, he was really upset. And the guy beat him up, and then two of his friends came and jumped him. So it was 3 against 1. And I became a prosecutor because I was wanting to prosecute hate crimes. And in Santa Clara County, we have a relatively small number of hate crimes. And I can talk about what a hate crime is versus a hate incident and things like that. But I'm very passionate about prosecuting hate crimes because, unlike virtually every other crime, a hate crime is a crime against 3. It's not just a crime against the victim. We say it's a crime against 3 because it's a hate crime against, in this case, John, the person who was beaten. It's a crime against John's community, the Asian American community. So it's a crime against 2 because the message is sent to the entire community: you don't belong here, you're not welcome here. So it's different than if someone's beaten up in a bar just because they're arguing about something. And it's a crime against 3 because a hate crime is a crime against our country. It's a crime against what the United States is supposed to stand for, which is equal protection under law. And so that's why hate crimes are really, really important. I haven't talked very much about that anti-Asian hate crime at any of the presentations or remarks that I've been given, but I've been thinking a lot about it because it was a long time ago. It was right when I was starting as a prosecutor, and it was one of the few cases that actually went to trial. And here's what I keep thinking about. So I tried that case. I was very inexperienced, very young prosecutor, but very passionate. I mean, I'm still passionate, but I was nowhere near as good a lawyer back then, 1 or 2 years in. And they hired a very expensive defense lawyer, and each of the people had a lawyer. And they came in and we tried the case in Palo Alto, which is considered a progressive, liberal community, well-to-do, outwardly very intolerant of hate speech and hate activity. Anyway, to make a long story short, we tried the case and it didn't result in a conviction. It resulted in a hung jury. 10-2. Has to be unanimous, but it was 10-2. It wasn't 10 for guilty. It was 10 for not guilty. And I'll never forget 2 women that were crying after a day and a half of deliberating because the other 10 people were saying, "Come on, you have to acquit, you have to acquit." And these 2 women came out, they were crying because they held their ground. Thank God, I was so happy. And we ended up retrying the case, and it's a long story, but we talked to the jurors. Why didn't you convict? Right, that's what you always want to know when I believe we have the evidence, we do it. And the jurors that voted to acquit, you know what they said? Does anybody have a guess about what these adults on the jury said? Just say it out loud if you want to take a guess.
Because they don't look American enough, it's not their problem.
What they said was, these guys were just joking around. That's what they said. One of the guys got on the stand and he said, I was just impersonating Jim Carrey from, I think, The Mask or Ace Ventura was a big movie back then. And he said, I was just goofing around like Jim Carrey. I wasn't being racist. I was just joking around. And then when the guy got out of his car, he came after me, and then I was acting in self-defense. And one reason I think about that, aside from that it was not a just result that I wanted, is, in some ways, things are way worse now. They're just way worse now because there's more hate incidents against AAPI now than ever before that I'm aware of. But maybe in one small way, no one thinks this is funny. I'm not aware of anybody that says, well, these are just jokes, making slanty eyes or speaking Asian gibberish or doing stuff. I remember when people could say, oh, why are you so sensitive? And I haven't heard that. I hear all sorts of other excuses. So anyway, thank you for letting me share that war story with you all. So a hate crime, here's what a hate crime is. A hate crime is a crime that is committed because of the person's status, their race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, or gender identity. So a protected category. So in order for there to be a hate crime, there needs to be a crime, okay? So it has to be a battery or a vandalism. It has to be a crime. But then we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, unanimously to 12 jurors, that the crime was committed because of what the race, religion, disability, sexual orientation is of the victim, or because at least they were perceived to be in that group. And Supervisor Lee talked about that issue of, a Chinese person is assaulted because they're perceived to be Japanese and people are angry at Japanese people. That's still a hate crime. So what's the difference between a hate incident and a hate crime? A hate incident, according to the FBI, is any type of threat or words or intimidation or bullying that happens to someone else because of their race or gender or all those categories. So it's much, much broader. And I know you all know that in the United States, we have the First Amendment and people have the right to free speech. And the First Amendment guarantees people the right to say despicable, gross, offensive, horrible things. And there are very few exceptions to that. So words alone do not constitute a crime, but they can certainly constitute a hate incident. Now, one of the exceptions is if it is a threat, a very specific threat, like I'm going to kill you, and you have the present apparent ability to carry it out, and the person that you say it to is genuinely scared, that's a crime. But if someone is walking down the street and a car drives by and someone yells a racial slur at them and keeps on driving, that's not a crime. That's a hate incident. So, and that's not to say that one is worse or one is better, but I'm a prosecutor. When people break the law, it's my job to work with the police and hold them accountable. I only learn about crimes when they are solved, for the most part. The police, someone calls the police investigate. If they know who did it, they bring it to me, and then I charge it as a hate crime. I go forward. So many things that happen, they don't have a suspect. So it's not solved and they don't bring it to me. or so many things happen, there may not be a crime, but it's a hate incident. So that's the difference between a hate crime and a hate incident. And if anybody has any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer it.
Yeah.
And finally, because I've been talking too long, just going on and on, I'll just say, what should we do? What should all of us do? What should all of you do? Call the police. Don't you think like, well, is this a crime? I don't know. Maybe this is a hate incident. I don't know if this is a hate crime. I don't even know what is going on. If anything happens where you see someone being abused or you're abused or there's bullying or name calling, or like I said, someone you know is walking down the street and someone yells a threat, call 911. Just do it. And tell other people, if you're like, tell the other people that are in Yapa, this happened. But aside from telling your parents and your friends and civic organizations, just call the police. Call 911. Let the police decide what to do. And I'm generally very, very proud that in the Bay Area and in Santa Clara County, for a long time, our police agencies have been very, very motivated to prosecute hate crimes and investigate hate crimes. That wasn't always the case years and years ago. Sometimes there was even hostility to the idea of a hate crime. Well, aren't all crimes hate involved? You know, that kind of thing. That's not the case. So don't worry about, well, are people going to think this is a big deal? Yeah, people think it's a big deal. So if there's one message that I would want to give tonight till, as long as I'm here till 8:30, it's spread the word to have people report it. And what I believe deep in my heart from being a prosecutor here for 26 years is that the AAPI community underreports all sorts of incidents, not just hate incidents or hate crimes.